Hey friends, thank you for tuning into this episode of Living Umpqua. This episode is going to be a little bit different than what you're used to. There's been a lot going on in the UAP, UFO space, whatever you want to call it, with the whistleblowers and Congress having hearings. And even my last show, my last episode, I played a little bit of audio from some flights just in the local area here that identified a UAP, in fact, three of them, traveling at possibly hypersonic speeds over the Florence coast, over Eugene, Southern Oregon. So, pretty crazy stuff. Another reason this has to do with Oregon, Southern Oregon, is check out this map. This is from 2023 to 2024. How many UAP sightings have ramped up in the area? So this is not all of the sightings across the world. This is just where there are concentrations of them, and you can see we we fit right into that category. So I thought it would be interesting to take a deep dive since it's something that interests me anyway. Let me tell you something, there's quite the rabbit hole. All right. I went down the rabbit hole for you so you don't have to. Guess what though? I can't do it all in one video. This is about a half-hour video, and I'm going to go over some key things that just came out with Dr. Stephen Greer. We're going to look at some of the newest information that's come out with some of these newest whistleblowers. So stick with me. We're going to check out this information. I'm going to guide you down that rabbit hole, but not too deep, and we're going to keep it in the realm of common sense. So check it out.
Well, one of the things I point out is that when the OSAP program came out and released their release, everything they said we knew 35 years ago. Easy.
I think they were just gonna, fucking rip us right there.
Yeah. You're worried they're going to kill you.
Yeah.
Access to that kind of black money. And what will they do to keep it secret? That's the only reason I brought this up. It's global. And their long game, which is, I think, about to happen. I'll just say, give you a preview. There's two ways this comes out. It comes out truthfully, and it's quite clear that these non-human intelligences and craft are not hostile.
There are many commentators who say that the non-human beings, the aliens, call them what you like, they're friendly, they're benevolent, that if they're real, they're no threat at all to humanity. Can we assume that?
Well, I think in order to understand if something is a threat, from a national security perspective, it's a very simple calculus. It's capabilities versus intent. We have examples where these things have disabled our nuclear capabilities, right? Like we see with Malmstrom Air Force Base and whatnot, where entire flights of our nuclear, part of our nuclear triad, has been taken offline, right?
If they were hostile with the technologies that they have, we'd be gone. We would have been gone in August of 1945 when we detonated the first atomic bomb. It had been over.
Oh, here's another one right here. You see him? Flying right over our heads. Pointing it right at him. And now he's turning.
Ooh,
Yeah.
it just flashed.
Yeah, you see him?
Yeah, it just flashed.
I'm lasering or at him, and he's curving.
In my digging, I can tell you that I have figured out three things. One, the government or probably private industry have reverse engineered technologies from an unknown source. Two, NHI or non-human intelligence is 100% real. And you should get used to that idea. And three, those who own or control the technology want to confuse the facts with misinformation. That's very clear. And that's what they've done for the last 80 years.
We have received and analyzed between 1 and 2,000 reports that have come to us from all kinds of sources. We've been able to explain them as hoaxes, as erroneously identified friendly aircraft, as meteorological or electronic phenomena or as light
A
aberrations.
group of researchers say they've identified at least 7 stars that might be surrounded by super advanced alien megastructures known as Dyson spheres. Yes, I said alien structures, and I know what you're thinking, but just stay with me here, because the basic idea was this: superior intelligent life might build big structures around their home stars or planets as a way to harness or reuse that energy. A 1960s physicist who came up with this idea, Freeman Dyson, argued that if these structures existed, there'd be so much energy that human scientists on Earth could probably spot it because it would emit a lot of infrared radiation. So in this new study, researchers say they found 7 sources glowing in the infrared, those are their words, but couldn't find an obvious explanation for why these sources are glowing so much, which could mean they're Dyson spheres or something else entirely.
However, they have spent a lot of money and time over the last 70 years staging, false alien threats. So let me start ticking these off for you. The abduction syndrome, totally a staged CIA and other corporate event. One of the men that we have who come forward recently was abducted by a Raytheon triangular craft. The animal mutilations everyone hears about, those are 100% man. Those are human. They're all portrayed as alien.
In or near where these dead carcasses appeared, there were markings that almost appeared as if they were footpads, if something had landed. Some cases there'd be burned grass of various sizes that people thought could have been, in simple terms, exhaust of some sort. So all these things suggested that maybe a UFO landed.
Some incidents suggest that the killers have the ability to lift and move its half-ton victims. Some cases are even accompanied by the sighting of strange lights.
Well, these ladies were going along Highway 41 and this light followed them all along the side of the highway, and it really scared them. It was quite a coincidence that this light was following them, and the next morning I find this cow. There's something going on here.
Sort of frightening stories of these objects being down in, developing world countries, blowing up a whole village. That's us. We've done that. Now, how are we doing it? Well, here's just one example of a man. And he and his 6 guys went off in a direction, came across in the jungle that object. This object, man-made, staffed with some kind of covert human operators without proper military insignia. And in the crate there, we found out from this new whistleblower, because he was at that conference at the National Press Club in June of 2023 when Mr. Herrera disclosed this. He was threatened to be killed by all these guys who were there. And then this crate, he thought they were transporting drugs. And then this new whistleblower came up and said, no, those are human assets in there. These are people that have been taken to be trained as a psionic operator. And a psionic operator is someone who, they pump them up full of drugs. Most of them end up dying or end up in a coma. Some of them survive. And people say, this sounds like science fiction. Yeah, well, you're not dealing with a Boeing 777. You're dealing with civilizations hundreds of thousands of years more advanced with technologies commensurate to having socially, spiritually, and technologically evolved for them.
Okay, hold the phone. This is crazy, right? So what Dr. Stephen Greer is saying is that the CIA is behind alien abductions, and the CIA is behind a lot of the UFO phenomena, and the CIA is behind, cow mutilations. I'm not sure. But essentially what he's saying is that there's a group, whether it's CIA or some type of private business, or they're working together, I don't know, that wants us to be very afraid of non-human intelligence, ET, or just whatever falls under that guise of non-human intelligence. So the idea is we should be afraid. The other crazy thing we're hearing here is that this technology is so advanced, it cannot be controlled by normal human means. And apparently that means that they need people with psionic capabilities to operate these craft, who they apparently take if they think they can do it. It's pretty wild. Now, he mentioned a gentleman and his unit who saw one of these demonstrations basically going on, a privately owned entity operating like a military entity. Well, let's just hear it in his own words. This is Michael Herrera, and he was a witness. And boy, I'll just let him put it in his own words here on the Sean Ryan Show.
My event had nothing to do with ETs. And there's some misconstrued concepts that are going about. The technology may have came from ETs at one point, and that's what we witnessed. When we saw this happen, and I want to say unidentified because right now it's identified. Everybody knows what they are now. They're either man-made or they're not. And if they're not, the government's coming out and telling people, admitting it, not directly, but they're still admitting it to a degree that it exists. Because why would they spend time with this legislation coming out?
I mean, you guys already, all 5 of you, right, already testified in front of Congress.
And you know as well as I do, in any kind of setting like that, whether you're in a SCIF, it's all under oath still, because they're having you sign NDAs and things like that.
You crest this hill.
Yep.
You look down into the valley.
Yep.
And there's a clearing. With a UAP.
Yes.
Just sitting there.
Hovering. Rotating clockwise, yep. And that's in transition this color spectrum I was telling you too. And all of a sudden we're enveloped by this military force I still to this day don't know who they are. And
how close did you get?
To the craft?
To the craft.
Roughly 200 meters, 150, 200.
Did you get to the bottom of the hill?
Yes.
So you saw the top of it, and then you could see underneath of it.
And underneath of it had this platform that was on the ground that was separate from this craft hovering. And it was very weird to see, and I was like, okay, I don't know if that's kind of like a cement pad or something. I don't know if it was like a helo pad or anything like that at first, but then started seeing how the material kind of looked very similar to what the craft was. It's like, well, that's separate. So you have something that's on the ground, stationary, and then you have something that's up top, and it's just rotating in a clockwise position. So right when we got close to it, at least 150, 200 meters out, then all of a sudden we were engaged, at least not in a hostile manner, at least, not gunfire or firefight or anything like that. So we kind of knew, and they started yelling at us. They were like, you're not supposed to fucking be here. What the fuck are you guys doing here? Who the fuck are you with? So they knew they were using the kind of lingo that we were using too, especially in the military. So it made me think that at some point these guys actually were uniformed military at one point. At one point they said they were going to smoke us. They could throw us out of a helicopter. It's very easy to get lost in the jungle out here. They kept saying stuff like that. So as they're searching us, we're watching this thing happen. And that's when we started seeing trucks come from our left and go onto this platform. And they were up armored 350s. I know exactly what 350s are. They were kind of beefier trucks. They were matte black. When they were coming at us, and they go left. And I was glancing between what was going on in front of us with these guys, and then all of a sudden glancing over to what was going on behind them. And that's when I started seeing the key details of this thing. Like it had like a scale pattern on it, kind of like an octagonal, because the craft itself was like an octagonal shape where you could see points. Had a pyramid structure on top that was black, and you can see the shadowing of it as it rotated. But it was rotating very slow. And then it had like these vents on every single corner on the middle part of these the panels anyway. There was like a Vanta black. It was like a dark black that would like absorb light. Because obviously I'm thinking it's drugs. I was like, okay, so this is a very advanced way to do that, just years of thinking of this. And come to find out, when I gave my speech in D.C. on that Saturday for the Disclosure Project with Dr. Greer, and this gentleman, I'm not going to give any detail. I know a little bit about him, but he works in some of these projects at some very controversial facilities. He's aware of what was going on. After I gave my presentation of this, explaining what the operations do, why they do it, and what they were using them for. And he says, there's not drugs that they're putting in these shipping containers. He says it's humans.
Human trafficking.
Yes. But it makes sense because they use natural disasters that people are going to be missing anyway, because we stumbled onto this thing. We ruined their operations, so to speak, because we weren't allowed to see that. I think they were just going to, fucking rip us right there.
Yeah. You're worried they're going to kill you.
Yeah.
When you saw this thing take off, I mean, do you have any estimation of speed? Have you seen anything? I mean, was it faster than anything you've seen before?
Yeah.
Was it a normal speed? How?
No, it was faster. It was the fastest thing I've ever seen. It was instantaneous. It was just like it left a blur.
Okay.
You know, like a jet screaming by going as fast as it possibly could, you can still make the shape of it and still lock your eyes onto it as it's going. There's no way in hell you could lock your eyes onto this thing as it's moving. That's how fast it was. I mean, it was just like, it just left a very fast blur. And like I said, I've never seen anything like that. The way that it moved, the way that it didn't make any sound, completely, didn't change pitch of the hum or anything like that.
Humans have ones that can go into space, through the air, through water, and very advanced ones that can go through solid matter. Now, there are also non-human ones. So this gets the crux. There's a whole section of this briefing document right here that goes through, here is a man-made one, here's a non-human one. And the differences, and Mr. Barber will confirm this, the technology has advanced so far in these operations that are being run unconstitutionally, the legacy aerospace and UFO programs, that it's very hard to distinguish a human one from a non-human one. This is dangerous. Why? Because people in the Pentagon that I have briefed who are not read into this, I mean, we're talking generals. The head of the Defense Intelligence Agency years ago had no information on this. The head of intelligence for the Joint Staff, go look up Admiral Tom Wilson. I was there, and as this whole scandal happened, because after Edgar Mitchell died, the astronaut who I'd brought to this meeting, his notes about the meeting leaked. And there was this brouhaha about the fact that I did a stand-up briefing for Admiral Wilson, who is the head of Intelligence Joint Staff. Part of what's left out is that I had given a briefing like this by courier to the Admiral before I did the stand-up briefing in his offices. He said, I'm Admiral Tom Wilson, J2, Joint Chiefs of Staff, head of Intelligence, Joint Chiefs of Staff. They said, oh, yes, sir, we know who you are. And he started drilling them on this issue. They said, sir, we can't tell you about this, talk to you about this. And they hung up.
Okay, my mind is blown. So Dr. Stephen Greer is saying at this point, we have some technology that can go through things and is so advanced that we can't tell the difference between it and whatever this non-human intelligence is that's flying around in the sky and buzzing around under our oceans, apparently. That is absolutely crazy. And then the Michael Herrera explanation of what he saw in the forest. I mean, this stuff is nuts. It really is no wonder you can get stuck going down this rabbit hole. But I'm going to try to guide us, and hopefully we can make sense out of all this. But it appears, from what we're seeing, that there's some kind of, deal between the government and a private group that are using this technology for their benefit. Maybe for human trafficking, maybe for drugs, maybe for things even more nefarious we don't really know. Maybe for our defense. I mean, who knows? And maybe this is all just misinformation to keep the country secure. It's really hard to say, but let's. we got a little more ways to go, so let's check it out.
He subsequently got threatened personally and was threatened with being demoted. All right. Now, that's the kind of thing done to decorated senior officers at the Pentagon who are not read into this. But imagine how dangerous it is that there are people responsible for the security of the United States, from the president and Congress on down, who either have no information or false information. And what's about to come out is going to be 1 part fact, probably 9 parts fiction. This is the reason this is going to be kept secret, is that at the right time they're going to disclose it, but they're going to try to present an alien threat from outer space to unite the world in sort of this totalitarian power grab. Yeah, but 90% of everything out here on this subject doesn't add up. It doesn't add up at all. I mean, and that in and of itself diminishes the credibility of the subject. The other problem is when you tell the actual truth about the subject, you discredit yourself. I was warned by a CIA guy in 1991. He said, if you tell the whole story here, the truth, it will discredit you because it's more bizarre than the fiction they're selling to the public. Remember, if you have technologies like that, Pat, and you have the malicious intent to deceive the public or officials, you can do all kinds of skullduggery, and they have. Now, most people just take it at face value. even these whistleblowers, they are tactical operators, right? I call them a tactical operator, helicopter, crash retrieval, whatever. They don't know what's going on the strategic level from at the top of that food chain, whether it be corporate or covert government programs. And the long game has always been to blend enough information with disinformation that the disinformation is believable, but then gaslight people that there's some threat out there. I'm going, oh yeah, I'll tell you who the threat is. It's humans. Humans are a threat not only to ourselves, we've become a threat out in space. So I have a totally opposite view of it, which most people are shocked by. A little knowledge is a very dangerous thing. They don't know enough to make a proper strategic plan. And this is why they need good advisors. You know, I don't care if it's me, but it's got to be somebody. It can't be somebody who's going to give you 1 part truth and 3 parts misinformation or disinformation, or fold in all the scary alien stuff.
Well,
that's
I mean,
false, which is exactly what people like Elizondo and others are doing.
Does any branch of the United States government or defense contractors possess technology?
Sir, there's documentation that I believe was submitted for the record that was approved for release by the U.S. Pentagon, by the Department of Defense Office of Pre-Publication Security Review, and it states one of the reasons why my predecessor program, OSAP, was trying to collect material of unknown origin. A space contract company that requested to divest itself of the material that was collected in the 1950s. Unfortunately, that didn't actually occur.
So let's dive into that. That's the Bigelow Airspace, correct?
99.9999% of all government people know nothing about ET hardware, corporations, where the hardware is, does it exist, what kind exists. They know nothing. And this sounds cavalier, but they're only elected officials. And I think we can see that we can agree, regardless of what party you belong to, if any, that we can't trust our elected officials. Lifetime admirals and generals can, on par, on average. 35-year career guys and gals that are in it can be much more trusted. And the reason that you either really know or don't know something is based on what is your need to know and what can you bring to the table. And if you can't satisfy those 2 criteria, you don't deserve to know anything.
Bigelow Aerospace. It made for the kind of conversation you don't ordinarily have with an accomplished CEO.
Do you believe in aliens?
I'm absolutely convinced. That's all there is to it.
Do you also believe that UFOs have come to Earth?
There has been and is an existing presence, an ET presence. And I spent millions and millions. I probably spent more as an individual than anybody else in the United States has ever spent on this subject.
Is it risky for you to say, in public that you believe in UFOs and aliens?
I don't care.
You don't worry that some people will say, did you hear that guy? He sounds like he's crazy.
I don't care.
Why not?
It's not going to make a difference. It's not going to change reality of what I know.
Do you imagine that in our space travels we will encounter other forms of intelligent life?
You don't have to go anywhere.
You can find it here.
Yeah.
Where exactly?
It's just like right under people's noses. Oh my gosh. Wow.
The FAA confirmed to us that for years it referred reports of UFOs and other unexplained phenomena to a company Bigelow owns.
If we were in a secure setting, if we were in a skiff, would you be able to provide or get access to something, whether it's visuals or material that we could put our hands on, or biologics, that would convince me, that would show me that we have non-human origins?
Sir, that decision would not be mine. That would be to the gatekeeper still in the U.S. government.
And who would we, so if you were in our shoes, where would you go from here? How would you get that information? A lot of times we just don't know who to ask. We don't know where to go next. So if you were in our shoes, where would you go?
Well, I prefer to answer that question in a closed session. However, we established Aero for that very purpose, and unfortunately, under its previous leadership, it failed. So one would hope that they would have the authorities necessary to do that. Let's hope that this new iteration of leadership will be successful. I am, sir, aware of the reporting that biologics have been recovered. Again, my focus was more nuts and bolts, looking at the physical aspects of these phenomena, how they interacted around military equities and nuclear equities. So I'm certainly not a medical expert. I would not be able to probably provide you a whole lot of value in that simply because I don't have the expertise.
But was anything described as that we have possession of bodies?
Yes, yes.
We have is it multiple types of creatures or?
Sir, I couldn't answer that. I can tell you anecdotally that it was discussed quite a bit when I was at the Pentagon. The problem is the supposed collection of these biological samples occurred before my time, in fact, before I was even born.
And was this part of the Lockheed Martin discussion, or was this the biologics is a completely separate?
Separate yet related.
Has anyone made contact?
Sir, I'm sorry, could you specify?
Has there been any, to your knowledge, any communication with a non-human life form?
So the term communication is a bit of a trick word because there's verbal communication like we're having now. The problem is you also have nonverbal communication. And so I would say definitively yes, but from a nonverbal meaning, when a Russian reconnaissance aircraft comes into U.S. airspace, we scramble 2 F-22s, and we are certainly communicating intent and capability. I think the same goes with this. We have these things that are being observed over controlled U.S. airspace, and they're not really doing a good job hiding themselves. They're making it pretty obvious they have the ability to even interfere with our nuclear equities. And
Let's say that everything I'm saying is true.
Mm-hmm.
This is all planning to come out this year through the intelligence community and a whole group of whistleblowers with the evidence and the proof. If this is handled wrong, what I've had conversations with people who have coming into the administration, they know that this will be 1,000 times worse than what went bad with COVID.
Why is that?
Because if you get this wrong and it pivots the whole world in a panic because there's non-human intelligence out there that are presented as a threat, that are abducting people and killing people and doing this, and it gets spun and mutilated into that direction, which has always been this covert group's plan.
Holy shit. Okay. So if we get this wrong, meaning if there's too much panic, then it could be even worse than what we experienced with the COVID deal in 2020, which I'm not even going down that rabbit hole. But that's pretty crazy. I mean, things were pretty lame back then. But I mean, it's not like we have anybody saying that they're going to come and that aliens are coming and we're in danger and that's going to happen, right?
Everything.
Well, I think the dialogue we're having now in this country, even with the recent legislation that passed through the legislature and is on its way up to the president's desk, even with that, we're kind of preparing the U.S. population at least, and by extension, the world population into that reality that there is a presence here, and that we need to explain this presence. Because if they show up and we continue to do what we did before in previous decades, and they show up, there will be mass panic. But if you understand that these are real, and we have 5 years from 2022, or maybe now 4 years, if they come in 2027, for the U.S. government to prepare the people about what is up there. And in many ways, I think the word got out within the government that they're showing up in 2027, and we better be prepared. And if not, there's going to be a lot of explaining to do here. And that's why in 2017, that set a clock of 10 years. And why Lou Elizondo earlier in this year said, just find a hobby for 5 years. And, it'll all be out in 5 years. And he said that this year. So that was 2027. And I would say I've heard 2027 in a kind of an official capacity that I can't reveal. And that there's limited time, a few more years to prepare the people. And that's what's ramping up this acceleration from the previous 7 decades of not even acknowledging it to now we are acknowledging it at a faster and faster pace.
The technologies that allow for energy generation from what's called the 0 point or quantum vacuum of space-time, meaning within the fabric of the space in this room, you can generate enough power to run your building with no pollution, no electric bill, no nuclear, no oil, gas, coal, no solar. It's a whole new physics, and that's been documented and proven to exist for decades. Now, that coming out would eliminate poverty in 20 years.
I want to know the access to 0 point energy. I want to know what technologies have been suppressed that give us access to wireless energy, 0 point energy, perpetual motion devices, or anything else that can generate electricity that takes us off the teat of the electric companies.
Again, Dr. Greer referencing technology, this time 0 point energy technology that has gone back and forth in circles for years and years and years, arguably not even real, or arguably very real and hidden from the general population. Kind of depends on who you ask, I guess. A lot of what you find when you go down this rabbit hole is like that. Dr. Greer thinks we're being fooled out of energy and resources that could help us all. And it seems like he's implying that Lou Elizondo and some others are trying to convince us that these things are a threat. Whatever's flying around in our sky and traveling in our seas at these crazy speeds. It's hard to say. What we have here, though, is Colonel John Alexander, who has been involved in multiple facets of the Army. The guy's resume is so long it would take 3 minutes to read the whole thing. But he was involved in some of the Stargate program. In fact, if you ever saw The Men Who Stare at Goats, there's a character in there kind of based on him. Super bright guy, super open-minded, and a great military man. He gets into this 0 point energy a little bit on the Sean Ryan show. Check this out.
Can you describe the Hutchinson effect?
Not effectively. John Hutchison, there's a video, and I don't have the tape of it. What had happened was George Hathaway, who's a double E from Toronto, and another guy came in, and they had a movie of these events happening, and the problem is not a single thing. Stuff would levitate. I mean, heavy items would levitate. And, again, these are things that can't, and there are any number of effects. John Hutchison is alive and well and now in California.
I feel that there is a dimension shift activated by very conventional electrostatics, RF fields that I use, and Tesla waves that I use, that actually form a keyway that opens up another area of time and space that may activate the 0 point energy fields and interdimensional reactions, let's say, to gravitational waves and time waves, or chronons, if you wish. Perhaps we're dealing in chronons and gravitons, which are maybe particles.
Yeah, with Hutchison, well, what happened was what he wanted to do is to make sparks. He literally had Van de Graaff generators and things like that because he liked to sit there and sparks. The way he found it, threw something in, and this thing came flying out. And he picks it up and throws it back in, and it comes flying out. And you're going like, what's this? Got a hold of a guy, and he and George were working with him. And we said, okay, we're going to pay you to replicate this event. So we agree to have show and tell, And I have a team of scientists, two of them from Los Alamos, and promise not to denigrate anybody. But anyway, they had four others, including myself. So we go to show. So I arrive a day early. Just want to make sure things are working. And they're really excited. Hey, we had this thing levitating. And so all we did was turn it off, leave everything settings. The idea was tomorrow we'll turn it back on and everything's right in place. Even if it's unusual, it'll happen. They come in, we turn it on, and damned if the power supply doesn't catch fire and burn up on the spot.
But it would also fix the environmental problems. And even if you don't think there's any climate change, you certainly have to admit that there are 5 million people a year dying from particulate matter in their airways and heart and lungs from burning fossil fuels. So these are great solutions that would be it'd be the tide that would lift all ships economically. 3 billion people who are in poverty would come up out of poverty.
Okay, so according to Dr. Stephen Greer, if this technology came out, it would be the tide that lift all ships, and we would, of course, just sing Kumbaya. Nobody would fight over it, and everybody have free energy. It'd be great. No, I'm just totally kidding. But you can see why, if that is the case, there might be some powers interested in keeping that kind of stuff on the shelf, and maybe we not sharing it with the rest of the world. When I talk about the defense part of it, if we have things that can travel as fast as some of these things can travel, do you think maybe they could stop nukes or hypersonic nukes? I mean, that could be a really important part of our defense we don't want people to know about. I don't know. It's really hard to say. Going down this rabbit hole, it's a deep one, and that's why this is only episode 1. Please give a like if you want to see episode 2 come, because I'm excited to work on it. And I would appreciate if you subscribe to the channel and joined me for bi-weekly regular news updates as well. Have a great one, everyone. Thank you for watching Living Umpqua, the UAP UFO show.